This, ladies and gentlemen, is the brand new Mini. It's here, it's available to buy right now, and trust me when I say it's brilliant. It's all new. Every panel, every switch, every engine has been re-engineered for the better. You're gonna love it. Except this bit, which I'll tell you about later, and except if you're a Mini purist that happens to think Minis should be small. In which case, you might want to get ready to change your opinions on what a Mini should really be. Take the body, for example. This car is 98 millimeters longer than the previous car. 98. That doesn't sound like an awful lot, but if this car continues at that rate of growth, in 100 years' time, it's going to be 42 feet long. Now, I don't have a problem with that, and neither do the people that make this car. But it does beg the question, is bigger really better? Well, in the case of the engine, the answer happens to be a resounding yes. I happen to be in the Cooper S, and if you're not a Mini aficionado, that basically means it's the sporty petrol version. It's got a big 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that kicks out a big 194 brake horsepower and a big 280 Newton meters of torque. 0 to 62 is 0.2 quicker than the old Cooper S, down to 6.8. And its 50 to 75 mile an hour speed, that's your overtaking speed, has dropped by a full second, down to 6 seconds dead. Of course, no sporty car is complete without the accompanying exhaust note, and this thing delivers. It's not too raucous, but it does make just the right noise. You can hear it over your right-hand side, especially when you've got the window cracked just a tiny bit. It sounds fantastic, especially on the overrun when it kicks out a little burble, and also you can hear the turbochargers spooling up and releasing pressure. Also, check this out. This thing down here is basically your mode selector switch. It's got 3 modes. You slide it across to the right-hand side, and that'll give you green mode, which is great when you're trying to save petrol. In the middle, there's the mid mode, which is kind of a happy halfway house, and all the way to the left, that's your sport mode, and that basically tightens everything up. Mini likes to talk about this go-kart-like handling that's in their cars, and normally I dismiss that as, marketing nonsense, but in this thing, it happens to be true. The steering is extremely responsive. A tiny little input causes a big response. If an animal or a child or something strays across your path and you swerve to avoid it, there's every chance you'll end up off the road, on the pavement, and in someone's living room. But you want that in a car. Every Mini comes with a 6-speed manual transmission as standard, and it does auto rev matching. What that basically means is every time you change down, it blips the throttle, increases the revs, and makes it a smoother gear change. It kind of makes you feel a little bit like a racing driver. It does heeling and towing for you without any need for any skill whatsoever. While the performance is absolutely spectacular, if we want to talk about really big changes, then we've got to mention the brand new interior. BMW own the Mini brand, and their interiors are superb, so it's no surprise to learn they've done a great job with the Mini. In my eyes, it's the best Mini cabin ever. Not only does it look great, but it's also really comfortable, really well laid out, and really practical. And again, that's down to the fact it's slightly larger. The wheelbase has been stretched by 23 millimeters, so there's more room to stretch out. The roof is 12 millimeters higher, so there's even more headroom in the front, and rear passengers get about 1 inch more space. That's the good news, but there is some bad news where build quality is concerned. I'm not 100% convinced by this thing. I drove the car from Mallorca, the launch venue, back to London, about a 1,500 mile journey or so, and about a third of the way into that journey, I ran into a bit of bother. I was driving quite enthusiastically, going through the gears. I went from first into second and into third, and as I selected third, boom. Now, I'm not ashamed to say that I'm happy that these are leather wiped clean seats, because if they weren't, let's just say there might have been a tiny stain. Now, it was quite easy to fix. I just put it back on the stick, pressed it on down, and it clipped back into place. But it kind of reveals to me that the locking mechanism for this thing isn't quite robust enough, I think personally. It uses 3 clips that spring open to keep it locked in place, but there isn't any kind of securing mechanism beyond that. There's no glue, there's no locking clip inside the knob itself. I think they probably need to do a little bit of work on that, maybe apply some glue or get some screws or something. It's not something that's happened to me in any other car. I never thought about this before, but I can guarantee you it concentrates the mind when you're doing about 60 miles an hour and this happens. BMW have reassured me that it hasn't happened to anyone else, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you about my experience. Yours may be completely different. For the record, this is the very first time a knob has ever gone off in my hand, and hopefully it will be the last. One thing I had absolutely no problem with whatsoever is the technology. It's very grown up in this car, and there's lots of it. One of the highlights for me is definitely the head-up display. It's a little color screen that pops up from the dash and shows you your speed, navigation data, media playback info, all in your line of sight. More impressive than that is this new central display. Cast your mind back to the classic Mini. That had a big old display in the middle acting as a speedo. On later models, they revamped this and added infotainment functionality. On the new Mini, they've taken things to a new extreme. This screen does pretty much everything. It will show you your sat-nav, your media interface, it will let you tweet, Facebook, usual BMW deal, but outside that there's a ring of LED lights. It reacts when you adjust the volume, temperature controls, and if you have the sat-nav activated, it will give you a countdown to your next turning. And it still acts as a rev counter. Charge along and the lights will climb higher and higher in sync with your engine RPM. Ultimately, there's no question that the Mini has grown in size. There's also no question that its extra girth means it's kind of diametrically opposed to what the original Mini stood for. But to me, that's a good thing. It's more comfortable, more refined, and has fewer compromises. It's grown up. Sure, Mini could have stuck to the original formula and produced a tiny city car, but then we'd all be sat here folded into tiny seats complaining about the ride quality and the lack of space. Instead, we can bask in its extra girth, soak it all up, and enjoy a vehicle that's free from compromises. Mini traditionalists may moan about it, but don't kid yourself. Size matters. Bigger really is better. But it's absolutely mental. Let me break down some numbers for you. 3-litre twin scroll turbocharger, 326 horsepower, 450 Newton meters. 10 things that you need to know about this. Number one, it's not pronounced hurricane, it's pronounced huracan. Now obviously you're gonna sound like a bit of a div saying that down the pub, but trust me on this one, I think. Number two, okay, this might look like any ordinary GTI, but I promise you this is next level. You can tell by all the styling tweaks they've applied. Actually, there is only one styling tweak. The only difference between this GTI Performance Pack